You're listening to Breaking Biz Dev with John Tyerman and Mark Wainwright. Conversations that break down, beat up, and redefine business development for the professional services firms of tomorrow. And now for your hosts, John and Mark.
Welcome, everybody. Hello, Mark. I'm excited to have another business development conversation with you.
Yeah, thanks, John. Yeah, business. Let's talk business development. Let's talk numbers. Actually, let's talk numbers. Let's talk numbers that will hopefully spark some interest and maybe scare our friends out there in business development a little bit, because it's not just about creating relationships, right? It's just not about the number of people you have in your Outlook contact list, John. This is where the rubber meets the road.
Yep, your activities need to impact the business. So let's dive into 5 marketing and 5 sales numbers that professional services firms need to know. But first, before we do that, Mark, I'd love to kind of have a quick conversation about the difference between numbers and metrics. How do we discern the two?
They are in the same world. I'm kind of looking at numbers as, okay, can we get real good clarity on what that particular number is? And I think that the metrics are, how are we doing in relation to that number? What's are we halfway there? Are we 3/4 way there? Are we how are we doing? I think the metrics is the temperature, right? And where are we? And I think the numbers are the numbers are the numbers. The numbers are the goals. And I think both of these things are important because firms lose track of both. Firms lose track of, or can't get their heads wrapped around, or can't identify or get clarity on what the actual number is, first of all, and then how to measure progress towards that. Because without numbers and without the metrics, without either one of those things, we're going to be in trouble. We're going to be lost. We're not going to really know if we're being successful or not, if we're making progress. So that's my spin. I don't know if you have a different spin on metrics and numbers.
Well, let me see if I just understand. So you're looking at a number as, the way that I would kind of look at that, as a key performance indicator, where you're measuring performance based on one specific number. And then the metrics are, maybe they're leading indicators that roll up to that key performance indicator. Do I have that? Am I reading that right?
Fair, sure,
Okay.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, that all totally makes sense to me.
All right, so I'll lead off with a marketing metric, and this is a metric by this definition. So first of all, I just want to clear something up. Every company that I've seen, every professional services firm, agencies, even different people within agencies, defines a lead differently.
Oh, the lead. Oh, that's a tough.
And so I'd like to beat up the lead a little bit. I'm not going to include any lead metrics in this. I don't think that it's a good metric to optimize for. And beyond that, the definitions become a little bit more clear. There's still a little bit of haziness around the stages that happen after a lead, if you're thinking about maybe a sales Kanban. But the first metric that I'd like to offer up is qualified opportunities by source. And so I define an opportunity as work that you want to win. So if we're judging that by, the work that that you want to win, the person who's reaching out, or the person that you're having a conversation with, fits your ideal customer profile. Yeah. And looking at this metric, qualified opportunities by source, it measures the channels or sources that are generating those opportunities, so you know which sources or channels to double down on in the future.
I like it. Which ones are working, which ones are not working, right? And I think you said that this is a leading indicator, right? That's what you've got written here. Why don't you give us the 30 seconds on the leading versus lagging?
Marketing's goal is to generate revenue for the business. I think that's probably the goal of many marketing functions within professional services firms. So if you think about that, in a sales motion, you need qualified opportunities in order to get to revenue, in order to get to new business revenue. So that is why that's a leading indicator, is because qualified opportunities, they're not yet won, the revenue's not yet realized, or the deal's not yet inked. So it is a leading indicator of that potential revenue.
Good. That's good. Yeah, and we, just to clarify for the listeners here, we are going to bounce back and forth a little bit, not just between marketing and selling numbers and metrics, but also sort of the type of indicators they are. And my editorial on this is that way too many organizations out there spend way too much time looking at a ton of lagging indicators and aren't spending enough time or seeking out the leading indicators, right? The things that are happening upstream, from marketing, from selling, whatever, from contracts, from revenue. They aren't looking far enough upstream to, be able to, sort of determine where they're going and then make adjustments or make changes, right? So, well, John, I only have one. We're just going to talk win rate. That's it, right?
Nothing else matters.
Who cares? Who cares about anything else? None of it matters. Just win rate. Most firms that I know out there obsess about win rate, right? It's on the dashboard. They talk about it monthly. They talk about it quarterly. They talk about it annually. Win rate, win rate. The problem with win rate, there's two major problems with win rate from my perspective. Well, there's three. First of all, it's a big lagging indicator, right? It's not doing anything upstream for you. First of all, with win rate, you can win a bunch of work that isn't a good fit, right? You can say yes to a bunch of, bad clients, bad contracts, bad engagements, bad projects, whatever else that aren't going to end well, that you didn't do a good job defining your ideal client profile, that, the relationships aren't there. The work is maybe slightly outside of your area of expertise. So you're really stretching and pushing yourself. And some people think, well, that's a good thing. But from a sort of revenue profitability standpoint, that's going to be a challenge, right? Maybe you've stretched, maybe you've overextended yourself, right? So you said yes to a bunch of work, or you won a bunch of work that, isn't a good fit. Second one, you can win a bunch of contracts that are poorly scoped and terribly priced, and you're not going to make a cent, right? So they're not going to be profitable. You're thinking, oh, great, win rates. We won this one, fantastic, great. Popping the champagne bottles, ringing the bell, whatever companies do. I see this all the time, right? We're going to ring the bell, great, but maybe there's somebody that's got their head in their hands in the office thinking, yeah, we won this one, but we're going to have a nearly impossible time making 1 red cent from this project because we gave up way too many concessions, right? They worked us over on the price, right? We just got beat up, so we're gonna have a tough time. So all right, there's my spiel on win rate. Okay, so it's fine, but it's also problematic, and people should be aware of that. First number that I want to talk about from a sales perspective, which most firms really kind of lose track of, is total potential revenue. Total potential revenue is a simple calculation that takes all of your staff members who have any amount of billable time, right? Any amount of utilization. A lot of firms use utilization rate, right? Mm-hmm. It can be 75%, it can be 50%, whatever the percentage of their billable rate is. You take that, you multiply it by, whatever their billing rate is. Most organizations that I'm familiar with use billing rate. Others do not. Others maybe just are working off of some revenue per, consultant, revenue per billable, employee, whatever it is, right? So you take that, you work all that through, and then you add it all up, and you think, okay, so the total capacity of our revenue engine, if we're firing at 100% here, if everybody's completely billed out, we've billed 100% of what we can potentially bill out at a particular billing rate. There's our total revenue, right? That's our dollar amount. That is what our revenue engine, that's what our organization can produce over the course of a year, right? There's your number. Now, there's a bunch of things you can kind of take off of that. You can look at what actual percentage of work was billed over our capacity to generate revenue. What percent was, what was lost during service, delivery. What did we have to write off? All kinds of stuff. There's all different ways that you can kind of take that particular number. But first important number here that I want to talk about is that firms need to define what their total revenue capacity, what their total potential revenue is over a given year. And sometimes that fluctuates because team members change a little bit, but figure out what that number is, right? that's your bogey, right? That is your target. Just stick that number on the wall and say, look, this is what our organization can produce over the course of a year, and let's see where we end up here, right? This is it's a lagging indicator, but this is an important exercise for firms to go through. That's a good one. John, what's your second one?
I like that exercise. It's a good exercise in setting growth targets too. If you want to layer on, well, we anticipate to hire X amount of people, and here's what their revenue potential can be, and then make that calculation. So I really like that as a number. My next marketing number that I have is client lifetime value.
I love that one.
I do too, because what it does is it shows you how much revenue should you expect from each new client. But in order to get to that, there's a lot of different ways to measure client lifetime value, and it can get a little complex because the question eventually arises, well, we have this client who's been a client of ours forever, right? And we don't know what the total lifetime value of that one client is, because we don't know when they're going to stop using our services.
Yeah.
So it can be a little tricky to make that calculation, and I would implore anyone listening to this to at least try to figure it out and get as close as you think you can to what that number is.
The other thing I love about client lifetime value is it brings our long-term clients that we've worked with for a while that have offered us good, repeatable, recurring revenue. It brings them back into focus, because I think a lot of times firms get themselves a little bit distracted with the new revenue, the new logo, the new clients. And so that's great. New revenue is important. That's a critical part of all of this. But lifetime value really brings those long-term relationships back into focus. So I think it's great. And lo and behold, you're going to find that, new revenue is important. It's an important part of our sort of annual revenue mix. But we need to make sure that we're not taking our long-term clients for granted, because their lifetime value is 3x, 5x, 10x, 20x what this new revenue is. So great stuff. Great stuff.
Yeah. So Mark, what's your next sales number?
My next sales number is a leading indicator.
All right.
And it's outreach activities. I mean, you can measure it monthly or you can measure it quarterly, but these are specific outreach activities undertaken by individuals, typically doers, sellers, people who have shared responsibility in delivering the work and also generating revenue, right? What is the quantity and the consistency of proactive outreach, to potential clients, maybe to long-term professional contacts they have that, might become clients, to others that they're getting to know, they're prospecting with, so these are the activities undertaken by individuals, which are a powerful leading indicator for, generating new qualified opportunities that, find their way into our pipeline that hopefully, are contracted and become, great new revenue, great new projects, et cetera. So outreach activities are super important because it shows that individuals are doing the right things way upstream that are ending up as new great contracts in our pipeline.
So I talked about qualified opportunities by source. I talked about client lifetime value, which is a lagging indicator. I didn't mention that. The next one that I have is client acquisition cost.
Yeah.
And so if we understand the value of one client, what's the cost to the firm to acquire one new client? And so this is, we're kind of building towards maybe more of a number than a metric, but I think this would probably be more of a metric that rolls up to a cost number or an expense number. But client acquisition cost, I think, it's really important to understand. And it's also important for firms to break that cost up by source. So how much does it cost to source one new client on search versus outbound versus maybe networking at events?
Yeah, great. In the sales world, right, this is called cost of sale, right? But these are different These are different numbers. They're close. They're like siblings or maybe cousins.
Sure.
They bump up against each other because there's a certain cost of related to marketing activities, certain marketing costs, and there's certain sales costs. So these are right next to each other. That's a great one.
So what's sales number 3 for you?
All right. Sales number 3, and a few of these that I have on my list relate to your pipeline, right? Which is all your pre-contract work. These are qualified opportunities. These are everything you've given a green light to. It's a great fit. There's a there, right? So how many new opportunities are we creating on a monthly basis? Because a lot of firms start to think about, if we look back at that total potential revenue, what is our total potential revenue to generate monthly revenue, right? Because that's sort of that's the engine. The engine works. The engine is just monthly revenue. How many contracts are we closing per month? So in order to close contracts, we need to originate new opportunities. And generally, we need to originate some multiple of new opportunities relative to the number that we close, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what new opportunities are we generating in our sales pipeline through any type of source? Maybe they're coming in through marketing, maybe they're coming in through sales prospecting, maybe they're repeat clients, maybe they're additional phases of work that find their way into a pipeline that we did a first part, last year or 2 years ago, and now there's a subsequent part that has come along. Whatever they are, how many new opportunities are we creating every month? And the other things that we can consider relative to this are, what is the average contract value of each one of those opportunities?
Mm-hmm.
Is that number going up, or going down? Are we saying yes to too many that are too small, that are going to be a challenge for us to make any kind of profit on, or is that number going up? Right, because generally speaking, most professional services firms that I work with have a sweet spot, and you want to make sure that you're moving towards that average, contract value sort of sweet spot. And the sweet spot means that it's a good bit of work, it lasts a good bit of time, they can be profitable, it's good revenue, it's all those things, right? It's something good and meaty you can roll your sleeves up to and get into. Great. All right, that was my third one. John, you're on to your fourth one. You talked about qualified opportunities by source, client lifetime value. Love that one. Client acquisition cost. And your fourth is?
Revenue by source.
Yeah.
So this would be a lagging indicator, but this is looking at where or which channels generated the revenue for the firm. And so this is post-sale. Obviously, the revenue needs to be realized. But this is important because you're going to be able to point to a specific channel or a specific program as saying, hey, this channel, this program generated X amount of revenue. Maybe it's an email marketing program. Maybe it's outbound sales activities. Maybe you're getting business and revenue from inbound traffic to your website. So this is an important metric for making adjustments to your strategy and making adjustments to your plan.
Right. That's, an important point on this one and all of these metrics and numbers is the reason these are important, the reason these exist, the reason organizations should consider all of these is to use them to make smart decisions for the future, right? And oftentimes, revenue by source will be some pie chart that's thrown up on a slide and everybody says, oh, gee whiz, that's interesting. But no one actually takes the next step to think, okay, so now we need to make specific and different choices to have different outcomes next time around, right?
Yep, that's exactly right. What's your sales metric number 4?
This is another pipeline metric, or maybe this is, closed won, right? This is the tail end of our pipeline. It's like, closed won revenue to date. Where are we?
Mm-hmm.
3 months into the year, where are we? Halfway through, where are we? You can do this monthly. You can do this quarterly. I think most firms, since they have sort of inflows and outflows monthly, it's totally fine to do this monthly. It's a lagging indicator. What are we closing per month compared to our monthly revenue target? We took that total potential revenue number that we came up with first, and we broke it out. We divided it by 12. that was per month, and some months will fluctuate up and down. But where are we tracking to that? Are we on track? Sometimes you'll have a really big contract come through, and that's 2 months or 3 months worth of revenue, right? But where are we, right? You have to pay attention to it constantly. I look at this number weekly with the organizations that I work with. I am completely focused on this, and particularly this time of year when we're coming up towards the end of the year. If firms are considering sort of the calendar year as sort of their financial year, which most do, right? Now we're looking at the end of the year and we're thinking, okay, we've got a gap, right? And what are we doing to close that gap? What specific opportunities do we have that are in our pipeline that just need to get over the hump a little bit? Is it a small one? Is it a big one? It's, how can we hit that? And it's usually a scramble. It's usually, the last 2 months of the year are going to be a frenetic bunch of activity. And, one of the things in professional services, right? These contracts are big, they're complex. And, sometimes you can't, dictate when an opportunity is going to close, right? But there are absolutely activities that you can do, phone calls you can make, follow-ups, emails, whatever it is, just by paying attention to really important contract opportunities that are in your pipeline. Just by paying a little bit more attention to them, maybe you can accelerate that whole process just a little bit more, and maybe it closes mid-December instead of like mid-January. Great, right? So that's an important one.
That's really interesting. And it seems like pipeline velocity may be a metric that could be used to measure the impact of those frenetic activities towards the end of the year, or paying attention to the deals and nurturing them along. Marketing metric number 5. I've got return on marketing investment. So a lot of what I've been doing is kind of building up to this, where you're looking at your client lifetime value, you're looking at client acquisition costs, revenue by source. So return on your marketing investment is something, especially in professional services, that can't really be measured right away. It's more of a lagging indicator. But how many dollars do you get back for every dollar you invest in marketing? That's essentially what it boils down to. And you can look at your return on marketing investment. You can break that down by different channels or sources. You can break that down by different programs. You could break that down by different business units if your firm is large enough and offers different kinds of services and has different focused marketing campaigns on each one of those segments. So it's a very useful metric for marketing leadership or people in a business development leadership position to be able to report up to the CEO or report to the board or report to the group of partners. It's something that they understand. It's something that the CFO or the financial controller will understand. So it's really a conduit between marketing performance and the leadership group.
Yeah. I like this one. I would say that the marketing leadership, the marketing team internally at the professional services firm needs to work hard for attribution, right? Mm-hmm. And that means that, look, this contract, this closed revenue, this financial performance that the firm experienced this year, some of that was attributed to marketing activities, right? And we need to make sure that we work hard to attribute all of that correctly, because a lot of times it gets sort of lost in the wash, right? It's mm-hmm. Everybody loses track of where exactly that kind of came from, and so marketing needs to stay focused on it and say, no, we can attribute that to the work that we did.
So what's your final sales number?
The final one is an interesting one, and to be perfectly honest, I have not implemented this in many organizations that I have worked with, but this is a powerful sort of sales metric, right? And this has to do with the ratio of dollars proposed to dollars contracted, right?
Okay.
So it's what you've got, what you've presented in the conversation, in your pricing conversation, and what ultimately was signed off on in the final contract. And a lot of people won't go back and compare those two numbers. A lot of times we'll just go back and look at the contract amount, and great. But we don't look at where did that start, right? What was originally proposed, and then through whatever back and forth that happened, or through whatever options you presented, when you were putting together pricing, how did that, what was the number that ended up on the final contract? So that, I think, is an important and critical and very interesting number to see. Okay, what did we, through our sales cycle, what did we understand? What needs did we define? What approach did we sort of scope out? And then what did we propose? And hopefully, when you propose this, John, I'm a huge fan of 3-option proposals, right? So what did we propose in our 3 options? What were the 3 options? What was finally sort of signed off on, and what did we contract, right? Did we, through our creation and presentation of options, were we able to steer clear of the, hey, Mark, sorry, the dollars are too much, go back and sharpen your pencil a little bit, and then come back to us with a lower price, right? Were we able to avoid that through a really well-conceived approach to pricing? Or, did this fall into our usual path of proposing one take it or leave it number, having the client come back to us and say, sharpen your pencil, and then we go back to them and say, okay, great, we'll do 100% of the scope for 80% of the price, right? So I think this is a really cool number that organizations can start to look at. I would say you could do this quarterly, kind of assessing this quarterly, not too frequently, but maybe not annually. It's definitely a lagging indicator because it's after the fact. But hopefully this starts to motivate and prompt organizations to approach that scoping and pricing differently, so that the delta between what they want to get out of the deal and what they ultimately get on the contract are the same. Right.
So when you're measuring this, do you typically look at if you have those 3 options, do you look at your ideal option as kind of the baseline of your proposed revenue, or do you look at like the high end option as your baseline for total proposed revenue? How do you handle that?
I would say ideal.
Okay.
An ideal could be the middle option. Generally speaking, it's going to be a middle option. It could be a low option, but I would say that it's generally what was originally conceived, that original sort of, this is how we're going to scope it, this is how we're going to price it. But if you go through the good exercise of presenting your options, you're going to reduce some scope and some price to give them a lower priced option to bracket, right? To frame this decision. Then you're going to give them a really high option with the kitchen sink in it, so that they have these 2 numbers to work with. And hopefully you're going to steer them towards the desired number. And again, this is not, the cliche, right? Selling ice to Eskimos kind of thing, selling organizations things they don't need, right? This is helping them make a decision and helping them pick the right solution that is the best one for them. And by the way, the best one for you.
Well, Mark, I think we've successfully gone over 10 different metrics and numbers, a combination of the 2. So yeah, I think we definitely beat up leads and win rate with this one.
Well, look, if you're going to continue to determine your success in marketing, selling, business development by win rate, you've got your blinders on. There is so much else out there that you can and should be focused on, and it doesn't begin and end with win rate.
Excellent. All right.
I think that's it. Until next time.
Thanks for listening to Breaking Biz Dev. Subscribe on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, or listen to the show at breakingbizdev.com. This episode was produced by Red Cedar Marketing. If you think a business podcast is right for your company, visit redcedarmarketing.com to learn more.